In the name of Allah, praise Allah and upon Prophet Muhammad and his family and companions. Now let's begin our course on power system protection. Now, what if the relay detects a fault and the circuit breaker fails to open the circuit? This is a natural question that must arise, and it's a tangible reality. The circuit breaker might fail to respond to the ground signal coming from the relay due to a mechanical fault, for example. In this case, we use a special device called a breaker filler, as shown in this diagram, if it encounters a fault. On this feeder, the protection device sends a trip signal to the circuit breaker, and at the same time, it sends a signal to the breaker failure. As soon as the breaker failure signal is received, the timer inside it starts a countdown for a duration that is sufficient for the circuit breaker to completely open the circuit. If the circuit breaker successfully opens the circuit within this time, it means that the CT signal stops the breaker filler at 0. It needs current and a timer. If fault current lasts 150 minutes, it cuts feeders. If the feeder fails, all are cut. The relay acts in 20 minutes plus delay. Current shows the circuit breaker is closed, needing a timer. These activate the breaker filler. If continuous current persists after a fault for 150 milliseconds, the breaker filler decides to disconnect all feeders supplying this feeder. If this feeder doesn't operate, all its feeders will be disconnected. The relay's decision time is quick, 20 milliseconds or less, plus overcurrent delay. The circuit breaker takes 50 to 100 milliseconds to open. The total time is the fault isolation time starting from the fault occurrence until the circuit breaker opens. In the next episode, we'll discuss the current and voltage transformer. Stay with us. All the feeders supplying it will be disconnected, and it's important to note that the time the relay needs to make a decision to trip or block is very quick, reaching 20 milliseconds or less, plus the time delay in case of an overcurrent. Meanwhile, the time the circuit breaker needs to open the circuit ranges from 50 to 100 milliseconds. The total of these two times is called the fault isolation time, which is the fault clearing time. The fault isolation time is the duration that starts from the moment the fault occurs until the circuit breaker opens. In the next episode, we will talk about the current transformer and the voltage transformer, which serve as the gateway to the relay, from which most of the internal relay signaling signals come. So stay with us. The revival of a nation, indeed,